Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to another session of our Digital Friday Lunch. My name is Sebastian Rodriguez. I will be your host today. And first of all, I would like to share very quickly something about who we are, the European Campaign Playbook, and what is the idea behind these events. The European Campaign Playbook is a volunteer-led community of pro-European campaign professionals. We work in different sectors for different political parties, for different political organizations, but what we have in common is that we are pro-Europeans and that we, in our campaigns, in one way or another, we are communicating Europe on a daily basis. And we come together to network, to learn best practices, and to try to make our job better, which in the end will be helping the pro-European cause in our continent. We run these events every Friday. We invite a guest to write the playbook with us on a very specific topic. Of course, and before I introduce our guest today, just to say that we don't receive money from anyone. We don't charge member fees to attend our events or anything like that. So it's free for all. The cost of running the website and this really cool tool that we use for live streaming, we cover it amongst a few of us. And you are always welcome to go to our website, sign up, get involved, and come forward with your ideas. We are looking always for people like you. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the topic and the guest of today. The topic today is going to be political advertising. Most of us, we are campaigners, and political advertising is a critical part of our daily job. It can be during an election, or it can be a public awareness campaign. It can come in many forms, but the truth is that political advertising, it's a challenge for all of us. With all the limitations on social media, it's even harder today to do this job, which is why I would like to introduce you to our guest, who is appearing on the screen now. His name is Benedict. Hey, Benedict.
Hi, Sebastian. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for your time, and I know you're very busy. And Benedict agreed to do this 1 hour masterclass with us on political advertising. And here is you will get to know the members of our community by the questions that they will post. But first, we want to learn from you. You are an advertising executive, expert, has been in the industry for years, worked for big accounts, and in your free time, which is what I love most about your profile, you run a very famous website called politicadvertising.co.uk, which is how I came to know you. But I would like you to share a little bit about you, your story, how you came about starting this website, and then we can start with the masterclass. Please take it away, Benedict.
Great. Well, thank you very much for everyone for joining. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I guess explaining a little bit about, my credentials. Someone a lot smarter than me has argued that 2007 was the year that represents the start of the era which we are living in today. 2007 was the year that Facebook opened up outside of colleges in America. It was the year where Twitter took off, and it was the year that the iPhone first launched. And there were many other things in 2007 that makes it a particularly special year. And in that year, I was studying politics at university and decided to focus my research on using the internet to try and help win elections. So that was when my first sort of interest in political advertising started. I then sort of, upon graduating, was thinking, okay, should I work in politics or should I work in advertising? And I decided to work in advertising and maintain a sort of very passionate interest in politics. So I've worked on some of the world's biggest brands, from Mercedes-Benz to Adidas to The Economist to Doritos. I've worked on lots of different sort of commercial brands, and I've also been fortunate enough to consult on some national elections, some regional elections, some internal leadership elections, and I've also run a series of issue-led campaigns. So I guess the things I'm going to speak to you about today are a mixture of my understanding from both an academic sense, which I have kept up since graduating, and a practical perspective, having worked in the advertising industry for 13 years. So I guess those are my credentials. I guess the spirit for this talk is that I've decided, I always think simplicity can never be valued enough. I think in both politics and advertising, the tendency to complicate is very strong, and I think it should be resisted. I think simplicity is important, and so I know I'm speaking to a sort of a virtual room full of experts, but I thought I would just share what I see as the fundamentals of election advertising, and I'm sure it's lots of things you will have heard before, but perhaps bringing it together and codifying it in a way that I have will make for an interesting discussion. In order to keep it simple for myself, I've kept all the advertising that I'm going to share in English language, but the principles that I am sharing are global and apply to elections around the world. And you'll see I've used examples from the UK, but also from the US and also from New Zealand to give a sense of scale of the principles. So in the spirit of simplicity, I guess the first thing I want to say is I believe there are only two campaigns. There are only really two election campaigns, and throughout history, the same campaigns repeat themselves again and again. And I don't think this is a bad thing. I think if you are running a campaign and it doesn't fit into one of these two categories, you should be perhaps really thinking about carefully whether you should be. The first campaign is It's Time for a Change. And this is the campaign that you run if you are a challenger. So you are not in office and you are trying to get into office, or you are trying to overturn what is currently the situation if it's a referendum. And just to give you a couple of examples of classic Time for a Change campaigns, this is one from the Labour Party, the Social Democratic Party in the UK, with Tony Blair as its leader. Challenger in 1997, vote because Britain deserves better. That's just another way of saying it's time for a change. Skip forward to 2010. The Labour Party have been in office 13 years. The Conservative Party under David Cameron, the centre-right party, run a campaign saying now is the time for a change, vote for a change. So that's the first campaign you can run, and you can see it time and again. I'll show you some more examples. The second campaign you can run is It's Not Time for a Change. And what you would run this campaign if you're an incumbent, and this campaign basically says things may not be perfect, but they're going okay. We need to keep going forwards, and what you really don't want to do is let the other people in and mess it up. So here we see the opposing side from the two elections I showed you. So this is the Conservative Party from 1997 running against Tony Blair. So they say Britain is booming. Don't let Labour blow it. And that's just another way of saying now is not time for a change. And then skip forward to 2010, David Cameron trying to win office for the first time. And the Labour Party run this piece of advertising. Don't let him take Britain back to the 1980s. That's just another way of saying, let's keep going forwards. We're on the right path. Now is not a time for change. Now, another way of thinking about those two campaigns, before I go on, just to prove that this works in other countries, not just the UK, Barack Obama in 2008, he is the challenger. He runs a Time for a Change campaign. Change we can believe in was his slogan. And then when he was an incumbent 4 years later, he runs with the campaign Forward. Now is not a time for change. So Barack Obama runs the campaign by the book, spot on, wins both elections. Donald Trump, we see again. So in 2016, he ran the campaign Make America Great Again. That's just another way of saying America is not great now. It's time for a change. And then we saw in 2020, last year, he ran the campaign Keep America Great, which was just another way of saying now is not time for a change. Let's keep going forwards. And then finally, in this sort of section, we've got Jacinda Ardern, current Prime Minister of New Zealand. In 2017, she ran the campaign Let's Do This. And interestingly, she left the word change out, but that was the theme of the campaign was change, let's do this. And then in 2020, she ran the campaign Let's Keep Moving, and she left forward out. So let's keep moving forward. And it's interesting the way that in both of her campaigns, she left out the key word, but undoubtedly those were the sentiments behind those two campaigns. So time and time again throughout history, and I'm sure it will be the same in your countries, the successful campaigns and even the unsuccessful campaigns, they stick to one of these two strategies. Another way of thinking about it is that if you are a challenger, the emotion that you are trying to sell to voters is anger. And often when you're a challenger, you're also trying to sell hope, but you can only have hope as a voter if you already feel anger. There is almost no point in being hopeful if you're actually quite comfortable with how things are right now. So here's an example from Scotland. In the referendum in Scotland in 2014, the separatist referendum when Scotland were trying to leave the UK. This was an advertisement for the campaigning to leave the UK. And it's a really angry advertisement. It's don't let them tell us we can't. And it's all about trying to stoke up anger amongst the Scottish people about the government in the UK controlling Scotland and not letting them control their future. Don't let them tell us we can't. Another classic example was the UK Brexit referendum in 2016. This was the famous advert by the Leave campaign. Let's give our NHS the 350 million the EU takes every week. So it's just all about anger. This is saying that the EU is robbing us. It's robbing us every week. It's robbing our health service. Let's take back control. And on the other side, if you're an incumbent, the emotion that you are trying to sell is fear, because you are trying to make them think that the current situation is perfectly fine and actually it could be a lot worse. And so the emotion you're trying to sell is fear. And this is an example from the Scottish referendum again in 2014 for the UK Together campaign. And this was an advert which says, is this your plan B, Alex? Alex Salmond was the leader of the separationist campaign. And Scotland had no answer as to what currency Scotland would be using if they left the UK, whether it would be the euro or the pound. So this was a campaign that was trying to scare the Scottish people into thinking, well, I might like the idea of Scotland being independent, but I'm actually quite scared of the fact that we won't have any money. So an excellent ad that played on the fears of the electorate. And here we go. This is for the Remain campaign in 2016, the Brexit campaign, the referendum. And this is I thought it was a very good advertisement. Leave and there's no going back. So again, it's not even telling people what's wrong with leaving. It's just making it clear that once you go, that's it. And it's selling the emotion of fear. So I guess if you accept this perspective that there are only two campaigns and there are only really two emotions that you're trying to sell, you then need to think about which parts of the electorate you are trying to sell these messages to. And I'm sure lots of you will be familiar with this sort of graph, but I thought I'd include it because it's an essential part of political advertising. On the Y column, you've got the sentiment that your voter feels towards your candidate or your cause or your party. And on the X-axis, you've got the likelihood of that voter to vote. And then you plot your graph. So if the voter you're speaking to is, or there is a voter segment which is unlikely to support your candidate and they are not likely to vote, ignore them. Don't care what they think, because they're not going to vote. And if they do vote, they're not going to vote for you. Then there's the group of voters who are highly likely to vote, or more than likely to vote than not, and they don't like you. And what you want to use your advertising for there is to stop those people from voting at all. You want to try and keep them away from the ballot box. Every vote for them is by this group of people is bad news for you. Then you've got the group of people who are very likely to vote and they feel very good about your candidate. And what you want to do with them is you want to get them to advocate for you and donate money for you. Then there are the group of people who are less likely to vote, but they feel really good about your candidate. And what you want to do with them is you want to knock on their door and you want to try and get them to go and vote. And there's lots of research that says the tactic to get people who are supportive but unlikely to vote to turn out is to get someone who is like them in whatever way that may be. They might live on the same street. They might work in the same job. They might, share, demographic things together. But you want to get someone who's relatable to that voter to explain to the voter why this election is so important and why they should vote. And then you've got the group in this section, which is what most people think of when they think about political advertising, which is persuasion. And this is the group of people who are undecided about your candidate, but they could be persuaded, and they are very likely to vote. And these are the people you want to use advertising which is persuasive, and you want to explain to them all the reasons why they should vote for your candidate. So you're not necessarily trying to get them to turn out. You're trying to get them to think about you in a different way. And that's the persuasion group. So if we now know we want to make people angry or scared, and we know which group of people we want to speak to and what we want them to do, but what should we be making them fearful or angry about? What are the topics? And we've there's a phrase that Linton Crosby is, for, I'm sure lots of you have heard of him, the Australian, they call him the Wizard of Oz. He ran several very successful election campaigns in Australia. He is since in the UK. He won 2 elections for Boris Johnson when he was mayor, and his company were instrumental in providing staff and resources for David Cameron's win in 2015. And Linton Crosby's protege was behind the 2019 UK general election victory for Boris Johnson. So Linton Crosby has a phrase, which I'll try and do in an Australian accent, which is, you can't fatten a pig on market day. And what he means by that is that you shouldn't try and use your advertising during a campaign period to introduce new ideas to the electorate. By the time it gets to an election period, people are fairly well decided about most of the issues at stake. A piece of advertising is not, a single Facebook video or a single graphic is unlikely to change someone's mind about something. But what it is very good at doing is reminding people of things they already think and stimulating thoughts they've already had and making them more powerful and more important in the decision-making process. So that's why polling is so important, because if you know that you need to find out what voters already think and remind them of it, you need to work out what do voters already think. And again, we've got a chart here. So on the X-axis, you've got what people think about you on different issues. And on the y-axis, you've got whether or not the electorate think those issues are important. And where you want to be campaigning is on the issues where the electorate think you are credible and that the electorate think the issue is important. And that's where you campaign. And your whole period in the build up to a campaign, you know, the years and years in the build up to a campaign should be spent trying to get as many issues that you are credible on and that the electorate think is important into that box. And so just to give you an example of this, this was the UK general election in 2019. This was the polling, and this is where the top 6 issues, because I've included leadership as an issue, the top 6 issues sit on the graph. So as you can see here, the Conservative Party under Boris Johnson were very good on Brexit. They were very good on crime. They were very good on the economy, and they were ahead on leadership as well. And sure enough, their election campaign advertising focused on Brexit. It focused on the economy. It focused on police and crime, and it focused on leadership. And it contrasted the leadership of Boris Johnson with the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, who was seen to be a weak leader. And then just looking at the same graph, but on the Labour side, so the Social Democratic side, health, so NHS health was an issue that was very important, and the electorate thought Labour were good on. And the environment was another issue that the electorate thought was quite important, and they thought Labour was quite credible on. And sure enough, the Labour campaign focused on health and the environment. So both campaigns ran by the book, but as what you can see by just those 2 charts alone, Boris Johnson was just so far ahead on many more issues, and went on to win a landslide victory, a majority in the Houses of Parliament. So then the final section, before we can have a discussion, a question that I always get asked is, do political adverts actually work? And even for people who, like, lots of people who I'm speaking to now work within the campaign industry, there is often skepticism about whether political advertising works. And I think that political advertising works in a variety of different ways and is absolutely essential to all facets of political marketing. So first of all, a big important aspect of political marketing is understanding the electorate, and you can use advertising to do that. This is an example of a Liberal Democrat advertising. The Liberal Democrats are kind of the third party in the UK, sort of centre-left party. And they ran a whole load of Facebook advertising tests just to see which photo of Joe Swinson, who was the leader in that election, which photo was the best. So they were using political advertising as a market research tool. So that is one way in which political advertising is effective, knowing what messages work for you, knowing which visuals work for you. That is one very effective way to use it. The second is, all political campaigns need supporters. They all need money, and they all need advocates. And political advertising is a brilliant way to do that. So here you've got 2 pieces of advertising for the Labour Party, and the intention for both of these is to try and get people who are already supportive of the Labour Party to click through, register, give their data, donate, agree to do some knocking on doors, do some door-to-door campaigning. That's what this advertising is all about, and it's very effective for doing that. The third way in which it's very useful is to register voters and to get out the vote. And so you see very much now a huge proportion of the budget is spent on trying to get people who you think are likely to vote or likely to be persuaded to vote for you to register to vote. And as well, more and more, particularly during this COVID era, trying to get people to register to vote by post is another way that political advertising is very effective. Another way in which it's very effective is to shape the election narrative. Lots of the information that the electorate are basing their decisions on at election time are based on what they read in the press, what they read online, what their friends say. And political advertising is very good for steering that narrative, for controlling that story. This was a piece of advertising that was run in the 2015 UK general election. This was, at the time, a hugely controversial poster. This is Alex Salmond, who is the leader of the SNP, the Scottish Nationalist Party, the Separational Party. And they were, the Conservative Party were accusing Labour of wanting to work with the Scottish Nationalist Separatist Party. And so they put Ed Miliband, who was the Labour Party leader at the time, in the top pocket of Alex Salmond. There's a British phrase, which is having someone in your pocket means that you've got them under control. And this was a poster that caused a huge stir. Everyone was talking about it. And the advertising agency who created this poster did some analysis which showed the number of media stories about the Labour Party going into coalition with the separatist Scottish National Party from the moment the poster was released to election day. You can see that this poster completely changed the media narrative around the election. And in all of the research that went on after this election, the fear in the electorate about Ed Miliband working with the Scottish Nationalists was cited as a key reason for people not trusting Ed Miliband and not thinking of him as a strong leader. And there is another tactic that has been deployed in the UK, and it's also been deployed in Australia, and I'd be interested to hear if this has been deployed in your countries, of posting deliberately badly designed political adverts in order to get people to take, to criticize them and make jokes about them. So this was the Conservative Party in the 2019 UK general election. They used the Comic Sans font, and they used horrible, glaring colors. And this was all designed to get journalists to write about this campaign and in effect advocate the Get Brexit Done message, which was core to Boris Johnson's campaign. And I guess the final way in which the political advertising is effective is through persuading undecided voters. I'm sure if you've worked in elections, you will have done work like this. These are a series of targeted adverts, each to different constituencies, so different regions within the UK, which says to that region, there is only, 2,120 votes between us and them at this election. Your vote will make a difference. Please get out. And in this case, it was the Conservative Party asking the electorate to get Brexit done. So when people talk about political or election advertising, they're typically, only thinking about this. They're only thinking about, is it persuading people to vote one way or the other? But actually, and election advertising is good at that, but it can be used in so many more ways. And really, it's an essential tool in the modern political campaign. So that's it from me. I sort of a final plug. I have an Instagram account. If you are interested in this sort of thing, I keep it relatively well updated. And if you want to engage, there's a nice community there, people talking about political advertising. So if you enjoyed this, I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Benedict. I think it was great. You touch upon so many points that I think are I fully agree with you. They are very relevant. You focus on the market that you know best, which is the English speaking one, especially the UK, the US, Australia. If someone is following us on social media and want to share their own perspective from their country or language, something that they saw that resembles what Benedict has shared with us, please feel free to post it as a comment. Or if you really want to join us here on stage, it can get very lonely here on stage, you can do that. There is a link on the comment sections that you can just click and you can join the discussion with us. I, as a host, I have or the privilege of firing the first question, and that is our community. As I explained at the beginning, we are pro-European campaigners. We may come from the left, from more like left wing, center left, liberals. I, for example, work for a liberal and centrist political group, and also in the center right, what you would call the mainstream pro-European thinking. And one of our weaknesses, which you saw in the UK, was or is currently our inability to translate what Europe is about into simple terms. We always go back to the data and how great it is and how much trade and big numbers in the billions, and I'm not saying that's not part of the discussion, but it is clearly we are falling behind, we are running behind the people who are on the opposite, our adversaries, no, on the opposite side. They have one thing in their favor, which is they have a big enemy to rally against and to induce fear about. So that's always helps. It's always more difficult to defend the status quo. But again, you show us some examples as to how you can defend the status quo. What would be key advice or some thoughts about how we can communicate Europe in very it can be in an election, or it can be because we have European elections coming in 2024. But also, I think nowadays in all European countries, there is a European angle to every election, because you always have a populist party on the far left or on the far right, or completely, political entrepreneurs who say everything that's wrong, and there are many things that are wrong with society. You have an enemy, which is Brussels and the bureaucracy in Brussels and unelected leaders, and even worse things have been said. So what would be your advice for people like us who really need to grapple with this environment, but still we need to communicate effectively on Europe? Just think about Europe in general, not so much left, right, liberal. What would be your advice?
Yeah, I think that in order to, if you think about the incumbent campaigns, and you need to make people fearful of loss and fearful of change, they have to, in some way, acknowledge the thing that they currently have is worth keeping. And I think where the UK went wrong is that the individual benefits of the European Union were not keenly felt, and were not for decades, because Europe was always a not a particularly popular thing in the UK. There was always a group of people who didn't like the European Union. The governments weren't particularly good at celebrating the things that the European Union did for the UK, and I think they tried to almost claim credit for anything that was good for themselves, and anything that was bad was the European Union's fault. And I think that was a long-term strategic error that many governments made, year after year after year, which is the good things were us and the bad things were them. And so I guess if we sort of went back in time, and I was running a pro-European organization, I try really hard in the build up to an election to label the things that are funded by the European Union and that have made possible by the European Union, acknowledged as being so. So I would say that would be the first the first thing. And the second thing is, I think if I was in your situation now and I was trying to campaign about what is bad about leaving the EU, I would be looking at British politics very closely, and I'd be trying to find examples where we said this would happen and it did happen, and because what the anti-EU side did very well in the UK is that they had this phrase they used called Project Fear, where they said, it's not really going to happen. All those bad things that the Remain group are saying, they're never going to happen. They're making it up. It's Project Fear. But I think what you now have is you have a tangible example to draw on. And yeah, I would be, making all of those points every time something bad happens, hit the electric with it. Bad things do happen. And look, they're happening right now. So that would probably be my second point.
What about something that we often say about, connected with basic emotions? So you mentioned fear, you mentioned hope. One of the things that, for example, for many young people across Europe, and of course Europe means different things for different people. So again, you cannot just say something, you cannot affirm broadly that something works for everyone. But for those, for example, younger people who are more European, more pro-European, they feel as European as, whatever their nationality they have. What would be, so they won't be, or at least my experience, that they are not so much interested about what would happen if something goes wrong, or they told you so sort of message. It can resonate better with older audiences, in my experience, and what they are looking for are more basic things, like, for example, freedoms, or like to have freedom, to have the liberty to, and we can talk about freedom a little bit later, to have the freedom to work, to move, to study. That's something that unfortunately British students have lost. Also, the protection of fundamental rights. I have a lot of friends becoming very anxious. They live in very tough places in Europe, in Poland, in Hungary, where there is a strong backlash of everything that has been achieved in terms of LGBTI, etc. So for them, Europe is protection of their rights, no? Unlike all the ones we younger people, they don't see immigration as a threat as much as older people do, no? So for these young people who are pro-European, they aspirational, right? It's like they think the future is going to be brighter, no? How does that play a difference in the way you communicate to them, no? How the emotions that they attach to an idea, in this case, the European Union.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
And I think I would try and, in a campaign, you can't just be relentlessly negative. And I think you do have to make an offer to people. And so in that particular situation, let's take freedom to work in different countries. I guess I would probably frame that as, isn't it great that you can wake up tomorrow and decide to move from Spain to France? Isn't that amazing? There are some people who want to take that away from you. And I think reminding people of why things are actually not so bad right now, what's good about now, I think is an important part of being an incumbent. But then you've got to have the switch to and there are some people who are trying to take that away from you. And I think sometimes what I think you mentioned it, and I think it's very true. The enemy is very, very clear for the anti-Europeans. You know what I mean? That it can be symbolized very, very clearly. And I think where the Remain campaign or the pro-European campaigns need to be good at is focusing on the enemy and who is the people who are trying to take this away from us. And I think in the UK, perhaps they didn't crystallize the enemy perhaps as clearly as they could have done.
Before I introduce you another question from questions that we are receiving on social media, I want to share, because I ask everyone to share a piece of political ads from their own countries or languages, and I'm going to share mine for Spain, which I think it was probably the most effective that I've seen so far, because everything that you've said came together, plus the physical, the physical environment. I think many, at least in Spain, many campaigns, they are trying to take over the street and do really big advertisement in busy avenues, etc. Which is something maybe we can touch upon if we have time. But the most effective one that I've seen, it was in Catalonia. As you know, over the last few years, we've had an increase of the pro-independence movement in Catalonia, with even a attempted or failed coup d'etat in 2017. But of course, the campaign that the pro-independence, the pro-independence Catalan had been building for years was amazing, was phenomenal. I mean, from a point of view of, theoretically, I mean, I couldn't disagree more with it, but from a political point of view, it was phenomenal. And one of the things that I saw, I went to Barcelona to, again, help an organization, do some consulting work, and I was waiting in Barcelona, so in one of the short-term distance trains that are very popular in Barcelona. It's like in London. It's what many people take from the suburbs, and they go to Barcelona to work, and then they go back, and they are crowded. I mean, they're always crowded. And so, especially in the peak hour. So I was waiting there. It was a crowded train. I came from the airport. So it's again, one of the busiest lines. And then I was waiting there, and there was outside of the train station. So it wasn't physically inside, but you could see it. And it was, of course, facing the train station. And it said, is this train busy? If we get from Spain, or if we get independence from Spain, this issue will be solved, or this will be faster, etc. It was in Catalan, of course. I understood it, but that was the message, and I thought this is perfect because it's physically, it resonated with me because I was running late for a meeting and the train was not coming, and then it was very clear. There was no images, only text, and it was like this. Very timely question, and then the answer, which is all your problems are going to be solved by what I am proposing, which in this case is independence. And of course, I found it outrageous, but it was there, and it was very effective. And I think they did it very well to try to connect, the daily life troubles with a political position. And so that's my share.
Definitely. And there's, in terms of making you angry, there's nothing more anger inducing than being stuck on a busy train and and it being late. So yeah, it sounds good. I'd love to see it. And to everyone, if there are any campaigns that fit within the framework that I've shared today, I'd love to see them. It's always tricky to find them from the UK, so please do share. I'd love to see them, and I'll stick them on my.
We started a thread on Twitter, so this one that I mentioned and more that we received, we'll just build this nice thread on Twitter, and it will stay there for the future. I'm gonna bring one question from YouTube, which you have there. Is it fair to say that the huge concentration of political advertising into digital channels has had a detrimental effect on the general quality and overall visibility of political advertising? There you go. Big question. Take it away.
It's a good question, and I would agree to it in the sense that I think the overall visibility of advertising to the general public has decreased. I think the great thing about posters, which are the sort of the main medium that is used in the UK, or was used in the UK in the pre-digital era, is that everyone saw them, even if they were only in particular constituencies. Everyone saw them, and it became part of the national debate. And because posters are expensive, political parties took quite a great deal of time and care into getting them right. And they're printed on bits of paper, so once they're done, and they're going to stay up there for a while. I do think that digital, obviously, you never really know if other people are seeing the ads that you're seeing, and because they are much cheaper to run and can be produced much quicker and taken up and taken down, I do think that generally the quality has reduced. That being said, I do think that you get some of the, it's in the digital era. I've seen some of the best political advertising I've ever seen. So I don't think it has put a ceiling on what can be achieved, but I do think the general bar has probably lowered somewhat. Yeah, I do agree with you.
And we mentioned digital. And I also dropped this idea of this advertisement on the street. And what about the other channels like TV, even mail? I know in the UK and not only in the UK. This is quite when I talk to people about a European approach to campaigning. One of the things I say is there are many things in common. One of them is mail advertisement, which in Spain it eats. I think it eats. If I say 50% of the budget, I'm not far. I'm not far from 50% of the budget is to mail people during the election period. Of course, in the for example, in Spain, you can only do campaigning during the last 2 weeks. Before the election. So in those 2 weeks, you have like massive, like all the parties will send you the not only their positioning and their messaging, but also the envelope already filled out, so that you don't need to do anything. You just need to take it and put it on the ballot box, and that eats like 50% of the budget. Some parties are getting very creative, and they are doing like targeting mail voting. So I mean, this is quite a thing, and I think in the UK too. So there are, of course, my point, all the ways of political advertising. We often talk about digital, but what do you see in the other forms? What other trends can you share with us, even if it's in the UK?
Well, I agree with you. The channel that usually takes the most budget but gets the least, journalistic interest is in direct mail. And I think actually a lecturer of mine is a guy called Phil Cowley. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should follow him. Philip Cowley. He's like an elections expert and very, very funny guy. He coined a thing which he's called Cowley's Law, which is the importance of the political marketing channel is in direct disproportion to the amount that journalists talk about it. So that's a sort of a funny thing. So shout out to Phil Cowley. I mean, I think we're seeing every election cycle, social media is used in more and more and different types of ways, I think that's really exciting, and I guess the next front I'm expecting to see open up is using influencers in social media marketing for politics. So there is something very, as I mentioned earlier, there's something very persuasive about someone who you relate to telling you that you should go out and vote. And I think thus far, and we've got these huge networks, Instagram, Twitter, of very influential people who people see themselves as being like in lots of ways. I think political parties that weaponize the ability to use influencers, I think that is an interesting thing that we've started to see a little bit, and I can see that being an area of growth. So I don't know if you remember, in the US there was a candidate called Mike Bloomberg, who spent more money on election advertising than anyone in history. At that point, Joe Biden took over later, but he used paid influencers. He got some of the biggest meme makers and social influencers, and he paid them to write these sort of slightly weird, very funny social posts to promote his candidacy. And I just thought that was super clever. I've not seen anyone do it as well as that since. But again, like if anyone on the call if you've seen a political party using influence as well, I'd be really interested to see that.
Indeed, and we actually started to work with influencers for a campaign that I ran ahead of the 2019, and it worked well. But of course, it was a non-partisan campaign. Get out the vote. I'm also very curious to see what are the experiences working with influencers in politics. There is shout out. I mean, I think Twitch is the platform where I've seen the more innovation in this respect, because I don't know what it has, that platform, that it's younger people in more like informal setting, and a lot of discussions are taking place at quite high level on Twitch. So just a thought. I have another question from Federica. If you follow Italian politics, I think we all should. What do you think about the successful campaign of Salvini? Thanks to the first Italian, or bring back migrants, especially media, he managed to pass the league from, multiply by 4 in only 4 years. Another political entrepreneur, opportunist, campaigning on migration, on fears, on people's fears, and then saying, your fears, I understand them, I show authenticity because I am credible, telling you that I understand them, no worries, because immigrants and Brussels are the problem, and I'm gonna fix them easily, which is the proposition. But take it away, Benedict, if you are into.
I think what these populists like Salvini, as you say, do very well is the simplicity of the argument. And I remember Donald Trump in 2016. His argument was so simple, but it was very. I can still remember it now, almost like word for word. It was. America is going in the wrong direction. The tax on the middle class is too high. America is under threat like never before from internal and external things like ISIS. And I'm going to make America great again. And Hillary Clinton is from the past and is not the person to do it. And during like the simplicity of and the way in which that narrative encourages itself. Is incredibly beguiling, and it's always easy to forget how little interest most people take in politics. And I think the tendency for incumbents to overcomplicate and to assume too much knowledge is very strong. And I think what a lot of the entrepreneur, the startups, the challenger brands who are doing well and riding the anti-EU wave, the simplicity of the argument. So I know we've talked about it already here, but finding the simple.
But to pick up on this, isn't that part? I mean, it's two sides of the same coin. I mean, on the one side, you have political advertising that, I mean, it makes you simplify things and come up with 3-word slogan, and because that's a reality if you want to even be in the game. Especially, I mean, you mentioned the cases of the UK, US, which in many instances, a few votes up or down, a few hundreds or thousands can give you a seat or not. In the rest of Europe, where you have like more representative proportional systems, I mean, it's not really like it's not that a few votes are gonna give you a lot of power, but it can give you enough to be able to be a kingmaker, for example.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
No, please.
Well, your point about how election advertising forces you to simplify, I think, is very true, and I think that is why all political parties should do election advertising, if for nothing else than to try and simplify your message. Yeah.
But again, I mean, that will inevitably fall into maybe small lies or big lies, no, like the 350 million pounds, no, a week. There is an example, for example, that in Spain, that the slogan, it was, and I think we're seeing that in many other countries. I follow the elections in the Netherlands. I was different, but a few components, which is it was freedom versus. In this case, it was freedom. It started. I mean, it was very interesting because it was freedom versus socialism. I was run by the center right, perhaps the president of the Madrid Autonomous Community, of the regional. She called a snap election because she felt she could do what she finally did, which is got reelected with more seats, and she had been from the very, very beginning, which is to your point that when you come to the campaign, you cannot bring anything new to the table. You need to repeat all truth. I mean, and this is something so true. And she, during the whole pandemic, she was the face at national level against the government who was putting restrictions because of the pandemic, no? And she was very successful at being seen credible on an issue that mattered, which was, okay, perhaps we all understand that there is a pandemic situation, but we are shutting down businesses, and this is, tourism is very important, as you know, in Spain, and she represented, I'm not sure exactly what, but at least this idea that we needed to move on from the, and that it was worth taking a risk. Freedom involves taking a risk, and maybe more people will die, but the economy as a whole and the freedom is more important than that, which is a crazy concept, no? But she managed to do that, and then the whole campaign was freedom versus socialism. I think she's trying to become like a Thatcherite in a way, and I think we're gonna see that. I don't know if you agree, like more.
Yeah,
freedom.
Definitely, and I think if you need to be able to simplify your campaign down to a single sentence, and we saw with Joe Biden in the States, you could even get it down to one word, which was decency. That's all he was campaigning on, was decency, just a return to decency, and he said it over and over and over again, and people, the moment that journalists and your own campaigners start getting bored with your story is probably the first time that voters hear it. So, I think repetition and simplicity cannot be overstated.
Yeah, it's a challenge. And we are not very good at it in terms of, we have to be better and just assume that by simplifying, you won't be, more for the most purist, you won't feel, you will feel that you are really leaving something important out, which is always the case, but you have to do it because otherwise you are not even in the picture, and that is happening to centrist and liberal parties. In these elections that I mentioned, they try to say, and we propose a lot of things for the young and policy driven. They didn't get any seats, and all the seats were it was a 2-horse race, freedom or socialism. And I think we, especially in my case, liberal centrists, we really need to get in the game, be comfortable with just how things work, trying to do it with ethics, in good spirit, not try to lie to anyone, and yeah. That's my final thoughts. We are gonna leave it here, Benedict, because we want to keep it to maximum 1 hour, so that now we can go back to our offices and finish everything before we go to the weekend. Thank you very much for your time. I said to you in the preparation that I didn't want to catch you off guard, but there is one thing that I intentionally didn't mention, which is, we always ask people to share, our guests to share something with us that is interesting. It can be a book that you recently read, a movie, a series, something that you want to share with us. maybe related with political advertising or not.
Sure.
And I will make sure that I will share it with everyone who followed us today.
Okay. I'll tell. There's a show on Netflix which is called Call Me Roger Stone. Have you seen this? Yeah. I watched it the other day. I've watched it before, but I watched it again the other day. And obviously, you know, he's a piece of work. But I do find it very entertaining. So yeah, I would say that if you haven't watched that, that's a good one. That's an easy one as well. I was thinking, should I recommend some really hard work, political marketing, academic?
No. Which is why I didn't let you prepare. Yeah, I think Roger Stone. I mean, Call Me Roger Stone. It's and plus I add to that. I will put it on the email to all our members. But there is another one which is related to what that series is about, which is the recount. He became famous during the recount in Florida. And so there is a movie called The Recount by Kevin Spacey, no? And that he's featuring the person who is currently the chief of staff of Joe Biden, Ron Klain.
Right, I've not seen this. Oh, great. Well,
The Recount.
Thank you.
So it's Kevin Spacey doing the let's say the part of the lawyer who defended Al Gore, and you can see Roger Stone on so you can have both stories, the Democrats and the Republicans. Okay, so thank you very much. We have Flor. We have a lot of thank yous, but yeah, thank you, Flor, from Nation Builder. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, thank you. That was from before. So you can see, I think we managed to bring something new to the audience to learn, and we leave it here. Great. Happy weekend to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, everyone. Bye.
Bye.